On the coldest night of the year, the witch opened her bottle of magic ink and wrote on every grave she could find. On each cold headstone, she dipped a long, crooked finger into the glowing black liquid and drew a twisted, ancient symbol. The ink pulsed with a sinister light, and soon the very ground began to shake. A low rumble echoed from beneath the earth, a sound like a giant stirring in its sleep. One by one, the graves cracked open. First, just a thin fissure, then widening into a gaping maw. Hands made of swirling mist crawled out from the darkness, gripping the damp soil. Eyes made of smoke opened, blinking in the moonlight. Dozens, then hundreds, of ghosts rose silently into the air. They were translucent figures, their forms flickering like candle flames in a draft. They floated above the broken earth, a silent, spectral army gathering under the watchful eyes of the witch. She stood on the hill overlooking the graveyard, a wicked smile spreading across her face as her creation came to life. Slowly, the ghostly legion began to drift toward the sleeping village nestled in the valley below. They moved without a sound at first, a silent, terrifying river of spirits flowing through the trees. As they neared the first houses, their silence broke. They whispered names only the dead should know. They screamed with voices like shattering glass, and they shook every window they passed, rattling the frames until the glass threatened to break. The villagers, tucked warm in their beds, began to stir, disturbed by the unnatural cold and the haunting sounds that filled the night. People woke to shadows floating through their closed doors, shapes that had no right to be there. In one house, chairs skidded across the wooden floor by themselves, crashing into walls. In another, lanterns hanging from the ceiling shattered, plunging rooms into darkness. Children cried out in the night as icy, invisible hands touched their bedroom walls, leaving behind patches of frost. A chilling terror, more potent than any winter storm, spread through the village like fire through a dry forest. From an open window, a villager's desperate shout cut through the chaos. "Someone stop this!" But no one dared step outside. The streets were filled with the wailing dead, and the living were prisoners in their own homes, paralyzed by fear. But in a small cottage at the center of the village lived a 20-year-old girl named Hannah. To her neighbors, she was quiet, perhaps a bit shy, but always kind. What they didn't know was that Hannah carried a secret, a supernatural power she had hidden her entire life, a power she was terrified to use. As the ghosts swarmed the village, they began to converge on her home, drawn to the strange energy radiating from within. Taking a deep breath, she unlatched her door and stepped outside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the ghosts paused. They turned their smoky eyes toward her, their ghostly wails dying down to a low hum. They felt her presence, and the very air around them trembled with an unspoken power. Hannah raised her hand, not in aggression, but with a quiet resolve. A brilliant circle of warm, golden light burst from her chest, expanding outwards in a radiant wave. The ghosts shrieked, their misty forms twisting and contorting as the light washed over them. On the hill, the witch, who had been watching with amusement, now appeared with a flash of dark energy, her laughter echoing across the valley. "You cannot defeat my ink," she cackled, her voice dripping with malice. Hannah didn't answer. Instead, she began to walk toward the witch, the pure light swirling around her bare feet, protecting her from the chilling presence of the spirits. "Your magic ends tonight," Hannah said, her voice steady and clear. With a final surge of speed, she reached the witch and her hand shot out, grabbing the ink bottle. The bottle itself screamed, a high-pitched, agonizing sound, as if the magic within it were alive and in pain. Without a moment's hesitation, Hannah crushed it in her fist. The glass shattered, and the black ink scattered into the air. Not as a liquid, but like a swarm of dying shadows, dissolving into nothingness before they could even touch the ground. As the source of their power was destroyed, the ghosts convulsed one last time. Their tortured forms dissolved, not into smoke, but into shimmering stardust that floated gently toward the heavens. The graveyard grew quiet, the last echoes of the ghost's wails fading away. The witch let out a final, frustrated shriek and vanished in a puff of foul-smelling smoke, never to be seen in those lands again. The spirits, now free from her curse, faded peacefully into the night sky, their final silent whispers seeming to thank Hana for setting them free. As the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, the villagers cautiously emerged from their homes. They saw the calm and the quiet, and in the center of it all, they saw Hana, standing alone as the last motes of starlight faded. They gathered around her, not with fear, but with awe and gratitude. They finally understood. Their lives had been saved by the quiet, unassuming girl they had so often overlooked. From that day forward, Hana became the guardian of the village, a beacon of light against the darkness. And thanks to her, the night was no longer a thing to be feared. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the shadows. See you next time.